Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kate Chance, and I'm the Faith Liaison with the Office of Community Partnerships. I'm hosting about 2 town halls a month on various topics, and so affordable housing is one of them. We're having them every other Tuesday, the 1st and 3rd of every month at 7 p.m. I'll put my email in the chat soon, but feel free to email me and reach out if you have suggestions for town halls in the future. But we're really excited to have this topic today on affordable housing. I also really appreciate everybody for being here, especially during the holiday season. We have so many different religious holidays that are going on right now, so your attendance is even more meaningful. We are recording today's meeting for those that are not able to attend today. I also would like to note that Kathia Chavez is here today from U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen's office, and we really appreciate you being here as well. I'd like to encourage you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know your name, and if there's a house of worship that you're affiliated with or an organization, we'd love to hear more about you. As some housekeeping, I would like to encourage everybody to remain muted unless you're speaking for the duration of this presentation. We have a really great agenda for you all, but we're gonna have to try to keep things short so that we don't keep you all here until 9 p.m. tonight talking about affordable housing, because I know that's an issue near and dear to a lot of our hearts. I also want to quickly introduce our religious land use working group. I see a couple of our members here today. I see Kersey Schroff. I believe I'm missing a few other members. Oh, I see Michael as well. So this is a group of folks that can help when it comes to religious zoning and permitting issues within Montgomery County. And soon they're also going to be hosting an in-person event about affordable housing and constructing affordable housing. So please stay tuned for that event. And if you all can please put your contact information in the chat, I would greatly appreciate it as well. So I know that affordable housing is such an important topic to the faith community, from those that are seeking asylum in Montgomery County, the newcomers that are coming in, to folks that have been in Montgomery County for generations. A lot of folks really have a hard time finding housing in our county, and it's an issue facing all of our communities. And so I know that the faith community is really passionate about addressing this, but we wanted to talk about some ways that the faith community can be a solution. This is something that the county executive and I have talked a lot about, and I know that he is especially passionate about this topic. So without further ado, I'd love to turn it over to our county executive, Mark Elrich.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because it's such a troubling topic. I got involved when I moved to Tacoma Park in tenant organizing around 1981, and I worked with tenants and organized them. The city had rent stabilization then, so I worked to support tenants' efforts to make the law stronger, and to protect people from evictions. And as a council member in Tacoma Park, I was able to rewrite the city's right of first refusal law, which gave tenants the right to buy property, and also to rewrite the rent stabilization laws. Rent stabilization was really important in Tacoma Park because it allowed us to keep people in Tacoma Park who otherwise would have been pushed out. And so we have a large mass of affordable housing where the rents can't go up by more than inflation unless there are building improvements being made. And it's really an anti-displacement model for affordable housing. And then I do believe that had we not put that law in place, the city would be in far worse shape than we are today, and many more people would not be able to have found homes in Montgomery County. So I've been doing this a long time. Just want to thank all of you for what you did to help us during the worst of the pandemic. The pandemic's not over, but it's certainly not quite as alarming as it was 6 months ago or even a few months ago. During the pandemic, the faith community distributed tens of thousands of flyers to inform residents about valuable resources and support for COVID-related losses. I think you know we've been running rental subsidy programs for a long time, and we'll likely give out over $100 million when this is all over with. Over more than a decade, the faith communities worked to create affordable housing in the county. Today, we have 28 of these affordable housing projects, and 13 are on land owned by houses of worship. And we deeply appreciated partnering with the faith community as we continue to apply every available policy tool and financial resource to help us reduce people's housing burdens. I want to just kind of set the stage for what's happening in Montgomery County, because too often people ignore it. You won't hear people generally who are saying they're champions of affordability actually talk about the problem Montgomery County faces. But this is the reality of what we face. In Montgomery County today, there are more than 20,000 households who earn less than $31,000 a year, who are severely rent burdened. If you make $30,000 a year, it means you can afford about $750 a month in rent. If you know of any of those apartments, let us know, because we don't see any. And more than 80% of all renters earning under $70,000 are housing cost burdened. So we have this enormous pool of people, it's well over 50,000 people who start out being housing cost burdened. Next, we've got Park and Planning's projections that because of gentrification and displacement, the county will lose another 11,000 housing units over the next decade by 2030. So you start with, 50,000 people who can't find affordable housing now, add 11,000 people. And then there's a projection for growth in Montgomery County, 40,000 households coming between 2020 and 2030. Of those 40,000 households, 3/4 of them, 30,000 people, will require subsidized housing. And of the 30,000, 20,000 will require heavy subsidies, not light subsidies. In other words, they require more than they can get in an MPDU apartment. So if you add all these people together, you're looking somewhere around 90,000 people who are in trouble with housing or going to be in trouble with housing. And Montgomery County, in terms of what we get for affordable housing, when a developer builds a project, I get 15% of their units. If people build 4,000 units a year, the county is going to get 1,500 units. That we're going to get 1,500 units in. No, it's too high. If I build 4,000 units a year, I get 600 units, and over 10 years, we're going to come nowhere close to the number of units that we need in order to meet the affordable housing needs in the county. To reduce severe cost burdens, we've been working to increase the number of deeply affordable units and preserve current affordable housing while protecting tenants from displacement. This has included financing to establish long-term affordability, rental assistance, support for home purchasing, and moderately priced dwelling units. These efforts generally have supported preserving and producing about 1,000 incremental regulated housing units per year. Nowhere near what we need. There are a couple of recent developments I'd like to mention, though, because they indicate different directions we can go in. The first is there's a planned redevelopment in Bethesda of 3 blocks along the east side of Wisconsin Avenue. The project's going to include 2 residential buildings with ownership opportunities, as well as affordable and deeply affordable housing at levels that currently exceed requirements, along with 2 parks that Bethesda is supposed to get that were identified in the sector plan. We negotiated public benefits that will be paid for by the developer and that will reduce the residents through tax revenue, that will provide, benefits to residents through tax revenue, green space, and most importantly, more affordable housing in an area that needs it. What we were able to do is get a landlord to agree to spread the condo fees over the other units, the market units in the development, as well as provide some relief on the cost of the units by spreading some of those costs among the market units. So we've managed to get a better deal that's going to house more people with deeper needs than we normally get. And I'm really excited about a project that's occurring in Emery Grove. This is a nearly 40-acre redevelopment. It's under the control of Emery Grove United Methodist Church, the Housing Opportunities Commission, Parks Department, MCPS, and the county. Together, we're working to bring to fruition an affordable ownership, affordable rental project for seniors and a walkable, pedestrian-friendly integrated village with opportunities for community-based cultural and retail components and significant historical programming. Emery Grove was a historically Black community that, like so many other places in the United States and the DC area, it was targeted for urban development, or whatever they called it back then. And what it wound up doing is obliterating the housing and removing the people who live there. So instead of bringing new opportunities to the residents, it basically removed the residents. And we're looking to build a project that will allow descendants, members of the communities to move back there and to create the community that they once had. And I'm really excited about this project. And then recently I directed our Department of General Services to create a webpage, and we're offering 17 county-owned properties to developers willing to build affordable housing projects, including deeply affordable housing. 4 or 5 of these are in Bethesda. I think another 4 or 5 are in Silver Spring, and the remaining are in other parts of the county. But this is a significant amount of property, and we're hoping that will attract developers to do this project. We're looking for very, very high levels of affordability. I'm not doing any projects where all I get is 15 or 30% of the units as MPDUs. We want real affordability down to the deepest levels we can. And because we own the property, we actually have the ability to control that. So that's a good thing. My budget this year, I expanded funding to the highest level for affordable housing that we've in county history. My housing budget includes investments of $140 million to reduce housing cost burdens and expand the preservation and production of housing that is affordable to our most burdened residents. Recommended budget includes about $57 million from Montgomery Housing Initiative operating budget, $43 million for existing capital projects, and $40 million for new naturally occurring affordable housing, for a new naturally occurring affordable housing fund capital project. And this new fund is going to be used to preserve and create affordable housing opportunities in areas at high risk of rent escalation, including along the Purple Line and other transit corridors. Purple Line is ground zero for displacement. There are a lot of buildings there that can be bought up and repositioned for a higher market. And we want to be able to step in aggressively, stop that from happening. My budget also includes increased funding for the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund that's going to help housing developers acquire and preserve affordable housing. This is very important because Montgomery County has about 26,000 naturally occurring affordable units. But Montgomery County, as I said earlier, Montgomery County Planning says we could lose up to 11,000 of those units by 2030. That would eliminate almost half of our existing naturally occurring affordable housing. Naturally occurring means that it's not under any price controls. It exists in the community, and it's not protected by anything other than the market, which keeps the housing price at a place where it's affordable to more people than the new units are. In addition to preservation of affordable housing, my budget maintains our support for creating new housing, including working with the faith community. And currently we have 2 projects underway with houses of worship, and we'll get a chance to talk more about that, I think, when Frank Racine come on. But they're important projects. The county has, weathered the pandemic, but we are all too aware now of all the underlying health conditions that have, really created major health problems for people in the Black and brown communities in Montgomery County, especially for people with low wealth and low wage. Keeping a roof over one's head during the pandemic was especially critical. And that's why we have these funds to help tenants pay for their back rents. And with the help of the faith community providing outreach to renters, we've actually provided $76 million in rent relief so far to more than 10,300 households. We have median incomes of $21,000 a year. And we had to target the rent relief on the lowest income of the households. It doesn't mean that everybody who got it needed it, but it meant that in order to protect people from displacement, we had to focus on those who were most at risk and least likely to have incomes that would enable them to recover from the hit that COVID had put on them. 85% of these funds were provided for Black and Hispanic households in communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic. We're also promoting state housing assistance for eligible homeowners who are impacted by COVID, and it provides some help with past due mortgage payments, housing fees, taxes, and home repairs. There are opportunities for churches to continue to be present in this effort. We're focusing on preserving, protecting, and producing more affordable housing. And we believe that the faith-based community, has property. People have expressed interest to us about developing their housing for affordability, and we want to be able to help. This is not just a challenge for the government, but basically all of us have to figure out what we can do to contribute to a solution. And that's, why we're partly in, here tonight, is to let you know that we're here. We'd like to work with you. Many of you own parcels of land on which we could certainly accommodate some housing. And because you would control the land, you'd be able to control the outcomes of what gets built on that housing, meaning you could likely dictate higher levels of affordability than the county gets when we're negotiating with the developer, particularly since they're only required to give us this limited amount of affordable housing. So I'm looking forward to this discussion tonight. And I was going to say that we're working on St. Anne's Episcopal Church in Damascus is creating a 76 unit affordable housing community. And the other project is the one I told you in Emery Grove, which is being done in association with Emery Grove United Methodist Church. So with the largest housing budget in county history and the will to do things, we are here to help. So it's great seeing you all here tonight. And I look forward to continuing to work together. And I will have to get off at some point in the not too distant future because I'm at a iftar ceremony in the east side of the county, and I will need to go over there in a few minutes. They loaned me this room to have the meeting on, very kind of them. But when I leave, you'll know that I'm going to another community meeting. And I'm sure you'd all appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, County Executive. I believe that I saw Reverend Eugene from St. Anne's on the call. I'm not sure if I saw a representative from Emery Grove, but feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if we have representation. Next, I want to ask Asim Nijam to introduce himself and to give a presentation. He's the Director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Asim Nigam, and it's good to be with you this evening. And first of all, I want to thank you for your leadership, your cooperation, and your support, and being a valuable member for us in working with us, with your constituents in getting the word out in terms of rental assistance and other social services that we have available for the renters community. As you heard from the county executive, the county has, committed a lot of money towards rental assistance. It's in excess of $100 million. And, while most of it has been either the state money or the federal money, the county has also contributed its own funds towards rental assistance. That being said, you are the trusted voices for us in your community, because no matter what kind of policies and what kind of amount we make it available, there's always that kind of a fear, especially when you're looking at working with the minorities and you have people coming in here from either different parts of the country or from outside of this country. There's that fear in dealing with the government, and that's where you come in. And we thank you for being such a trusted voice for us in getting the word out. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, having said that, the issue of affordable housing is a multi-fold issue. And what we learned from this pandemic is the need for affordable housing is even greater. While we provide the services, social services through service organizations, and the county has committed, or spent almost $2 million, most of it is county funds. Only $500,000 was from the federal government funds. But the need for ultimate affordable housing is there. So it's going to be a long tail for all of us as we recover from this pandemic. Now, so where are the opportunities here? And that's a part of this discussion this evening. And we want to hear from you, your suggestions, your limitations or concerns that you have. If you look at the county doesn't own a whole lot of land, except for once you take out the agricultural land, there's not a whole lot of land the county owns. You heard from the county executive that we have put out 17 lots, whether it's county owned or parking lots, in different areas of the county. That being said, what we see, preservation is an opportunity, but then in terms of new construction, our resources are limited in terms of the land. And that's where you all come in. If you look at, your own assets, and one thing that we have learned from the pandemic is, at one time in my prior life, people, when I met with the faith-based community, they were, thinking about expanding their, their facility because more and more people were going in person for services. All that paradigm has changed. It's a new thinking now. People are thinking about, hybrid presence. So some people may go in person, some others may do it in virtual mode. So in terms of, as you think about your own assets, the land that you have, which may be underutilized or not utilized at all, you may see that you don't have that much need to expand your current facility, yet you want to create a vehicle to have a cash flow coming in for future years. So as you're thinking about, affordable housing, I see as a challenge, but then there's an opportunity here. And the opportunity is here that we can all work together in terms of the assets that you have, how you can leverage your assets. You can approach us. We have great tools. You will hear shortly about the financing tool that we have made it, practical after 2 years of work with several, committee members, financial partners, and thanks to the council and the county executive for believing in us. So we can create the tools. We have the money, as you heard from the county executive. It's, for the first time in Montgomery County's history, we have $140 million as a recommended budget for housing support, preservation, and creation of affordable housing, of which, if the council approves our budget, we'll have $100 million available for capital loans. That's a lot of money. And this has never happened in the history of Montgomery County. But then we understand, if you are a new developer and you don't know what to go for, where to get the resources, that's the purpose of this dialogue today. You will hear from enterprise what all resources they bring to the table. Now, I will also tell you, development is not easy. It is complicated, it's time consuming, and it takes money too. Although, in the county, we have achieved efficiencies through a permitting process and through other, departments, and I'm sure planning departments is doing the same thing. But if you look across this region or anywhere in the country, it takes time and a lot of patience. So that's where we want to connect with all of you, that where we can bring our resources to the table and our partners to help you. We may not be able to say, go and do joint venture with XYZ, but what we can tell you that what all developments we have done, who were our partners. To date, DHCA has done 28 projects with faith-based communities. Out of those 28 projects, 13 of those projects have been developed on the land owned by the faith-based community. So we have a product which works, and we have pilot, we have other resources. So without spending too much time, I know you're waiting to hear from other folks. I'm going to take a pause here. Lorraine, can you just quickly go through the slides, please? I'll just zip through the slides. We can email those slides to you through Kate so that you can have something in your possession. You can go to the next slide, please. So I went over, the renters information, homeowners, the state is providing homeowners assistance through various tools. So you can visit the state's website. And if you have any questions, I'm sure, they have something on their link where you can post your questions. I think I've gone through all of this. Now, I've already gone through the service organizations. We have funding, CASA, Housing Initiative Partnership, LEDC. Then we're also funding Maryland Legal Aid, Homeless Person Representation Project. They are providing legal assistance to the tenants on site in the court. And a lot of tenants have taken advantage of that legal assistance. Next slide, please. I think already gone over this. In the next few days, we'll be doing the groundbreaking for the new project, which is being co-developed by St. Anne Episcopal Church and also by Mission First. So we will provide multiple units at different levels of AMI from 30% to 70%. Next slide, please. And we already gone over this slide that, with $140 million of recommended budget for housing support, preservation, and the new construction, we have a lot of money, available should the council approve our recommended budget. And of course, there is a new fund for national recurring affordable housing that we are recommending $40 million. If you look at just the purple line, on the Montgomery County side, there are 6,500 units that are called NOAA units. And then, as you heard, from the county executive, we have 25,000, 26,000 NOAA units across the county. So there's a lot of opportunities to preserve these units on a long-term basis. And if you have any questions, here's our contact information. You can visit our website for our annual report, which will give you a plethora of information on our different programs and different projects as such. And if you have any questions, please call us. I think that was the last slide. So after this, I'm going to invite Frank and Claude, who can talk about our new financing tool, Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, which we are very excited about. Frank?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much, Asim. Frank Demaray with the Department, Housing Community Affairs. And just reiterating, we are available to support questions. We work with the development community. The county is very fortunate to have a very significant number of mission-driven affordable housing developers. They're very interested in any opportunity to help develop new, preserve existing. And so the department is a coordinator of our funds. And one of the specific things that we're doing, and I'll introduce Claude Hare here from National Housing Trust. We recently announced that we've committed the county's acquisition funding vehicle, which we call the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, to be managed as a fund by National Housing Trust, bringing their resources, their expertise, and to work with developers in acquiring, stabilizing, and then implementing long-term financing. And as was mentioned, we believe that in the current environment, significant pressures on rents are building. We're seeing sales prices and activity that indicates that there's a critical need to support affordable housing developers acquiring. And when we acquire or the developer acquires, put in long-term 30, 40-year rent restrictions supporting households at certain income levels. But before you can get to those long-term, properties need to be acquired. So asking Claude here to introduce herself, the NHT, all that NHT does together with what we're working on together. So thank you very much, Claude.
Thank you, Frank. And good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here alongside you all, members of the faith community and many of NHT's partners and the team at Montgomery County, David Bowers, who you'll hear from later at Enterprise. I'm really excited to share more about the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, or AHOF, as Frank mentioned, which NHT, National Housing Trust, is managing. So just a quick introduction. Again, I'm Claude Hare. I'm the Director of Lending at NHT. NHT is a nonprofit affordable housing organization based out of DC. And overall, our mission is to advance and preserve improve affordable homes through several business lines, including public policy. We have a real estate development arm and more. So our lending team houses a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. And as lenders, we provide flexible financing to mission-driven developers and owners to protect and create more affordable housing. Most of our work and portfolio is in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia region. So I don't have any slides, but I did send our one pager. See, Lorraine's uploading it now. So I thought the best use of our time would just for me to walk through some of the big picture eligibility terms and requirements for AHOF, detailed on the screen. And hopefully I don't get too far in the weeds here, but if there's time for questions, and certainly we can follow up individually with folks that have further questions about the fund. But the big picture here is that AHOF is a dedicated pool of $14 million of revolving Montgomery County funds. Again, NHT's role specifically is to arrange additional private capital, which primarily will come from NHT, that's blended with the county's $14 million. And then secondly, the big piece of it is that NHT, we coordinate applications from developers who are looking to acquire properties and seek acquisition financing and pre-development funding, and to move quickly and nimbly. So the purpose of the fund is threefold. Again, one, to provide quick strike acquisition and pre-development loans that are short-term, so under 3 years or under. And the fund will be used for preservation of existing affordable housing or the projected creation of affordable housing units. And the third purpose really hones in on the affordability aspect, which you've heard. It's a major component of the county's goals. We are providing flexible and patient capital to allow time to ultimately secure financing that enables long-term affordability. And that specifically means projects that at least half of the units are dedicated to households earning 70% or AMI or below for at least 10 years after the date of acquisition. So going to the row borrower eligibility, this extends to both for-profit and nonprofit entities, including faith-based institutions and affiliates, such as yourself, and partnerships possibly formed with other developers. In terms of the loan size, we can go up to 30 million, but a large range of what we can do in terms of supporting acquisitions. And then in terms of the loan term, as I mentioned, these are shorter term, up to 3 years before repayment is required. And just to paint a picture, most of the transactions that we will be underwriting will be with low-income housing tax credits as the primary takeout. So during that 3-year or so loan term, the development team that you as a faith-based institution or have put together will have time to apply for affordable housing tax credits, which ultimately would pay off the acquisition loan. And at the same time, as fund managers, we'd also consider other options for repayment, as long as the affordability component is maintained. That's the most important piece. So going into interest rate, these loans will be at 4.9%, 4.95%, interest only or lower. If certain criteria is met, interest rates could be lower. Frank kind of alluded to NHT, we do more than just the AHOF management. We also have a fund that supports affordable housing within 1 mile of future Purple Line stops. So that's an example where we're able to blend in that unique capital if a project is near the Purple Line to lower the rate below 4.95% if it's eligible in that sense. And then I'll jump into kind of the collateral section if you want to scroll down a bit more. These loans will primarily be secured in first position, subordinate positions, and can go up to 100% LTV loan to value. But there's also an opportunity to have an unsecured portion for pre-development, which would be for recourse to the developer's balance sheet. So that kind of goes a bit into the financial capacity of the development team. So I'll talk about process. I know that's a big piece of it as well. Whether you have a specific project in mind, there's excess land that you're wanting to just explore how you can activate it. The process is really to reach out to me. I will add my information to the chat and also send a link to this term sheet that you see here. And the process is, as fund manager NHT, we coordinate the screening, information gathering for different prospects, and in consultation with the county, if the project meets eligibility, we would then invite the potential partner to actually apply for the funding. So there's a lot of screening on the front end. And the goal really here is to work nimbly to get loans approved very quickly. And that's one of the benefits of NHT coming in as a fund manager. We've worked with Frank and his team to really streamline this process. We just launched it, but once we start getting the ball rolling, we'll be able to move quickly to get loans on the docket. So I'll close there by saying NHT, we have a solid history of working with a faith-based community. Folks have mentioned the St. Anne's development in Damascus. We provided a pre-development loan to St. Anne's development partner Mission First to get that across the finish line, and really excited that next week the launch will be going on. And we have some other examples working with churches in Montgomery County and Prince George's. So happy to be an added resource as you think about this and make connections to talk through the lending process, but also make connections to developers that you may want to think about working with as you think about how you can activate affordable housing through your work. So that is what I have. Again, let me just copy really quick and I'll paste my information in the chat. Happy to answer questions or follow up with one-on-one conversations later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for your presentation. That was really helpful and informative. I want to hand it off to our last speaker. We're really glad to have from Enterprise, who's going to talk to you more about what they're able to offer the community. So we have David Bowers, and David Bowers is also a faith liaison similar to me, but for Enterprise. So he works largely with the faith community and helping them with affordable housing. So David, back to you.
Kate, many thanks. Appreciate being here. Thanks to the county executive and Nasim and Frank for the invitation. Good to be with colleagues in the industry like Claude, and good to see my old friend Reverend Courtney Miller and others who are here. So want to share some lessons learned from an initiative we've done. We can go to the next slide. Let me take the first 2 or 3 minutes here to just share a quick overview of who Enterprise is. I always like to tell people that faith-based is in our founding DNA. We were founded out of a faith-based encounter when 3 women out of the Church of the Savior community said to the late Jim Rouse, a for-profit real estate developer, they wanted to preserve 2 buildings as affordable for low-income people. He ran the numbers, said it didn't pencil out. I always say never doubt the power of 3 women in a faith community, and they went off and raised and put down a non-refundable deposit on the building and said to him, now what are you willing to do? So I always say that kind of conventional underwriting said no, but faith said yes. And out of that encounter was birthed the Enterprise Foundation, now called enterprise community partners. So a faith-based encounter really is the genesis of enterprise. We can go to the next slide. So we're a national organization, a nonprofit that really focuses on enhancing life outcomes for people with affordable housing is really the foundation of that. We work across multiple platforms, a solutions platform, doing policy work, programmatic work, like our faith-based development work. We also provide capital, range of different capital products. And we actually have an arm of enterprise that is an owner operator of over 12,000 homes in the Mid-Atlantic. We can go to the next slide. Our Mid-Atlantic office, we are one of 11 offices in the enterprise network. We cover DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Key focus areas for us, tied in, connected to the national priorities around increasing housing supply, focus on preservation and production of affordable housing, very involved with efforts along the Purple Line, for example, production. You'll hear more about our faith-based initiative. Bridging racial equity gaps in Baltimore and DC, and growing the pie of resources available for affordable housing. So always encouraging to hear as new appropriations are being made by public sector players, as well as on the private sector side. And you'll see the investments we've made historically in the region, including in Montgomery County. We can go to the next slide. So let's start to focus on our faith-based development initiative, who we are and lessons that we've learned, what I really want to focus on tonight. So we started this initiative and historically we've had various strategic advisors and partners, including the groups that you see here on the slide, local nonprofit in DC, Georgetown University, Wesley Seminary. I saw Reverend Dr. Sam Murillo on the line, always great to have him here, and the University of Baltimore. We started in 2006. The key here, headline, our goal is to get new units of affordable housing and community facilities developed. We work with houses of worship with undeveloped or underdeveloped land to help make an informed go or no go decision about development, and then connect the houses of worship to critical development, legal, and capital resources as they go along the process. When we think about why, don't need to preach to the choir, we've heard some of that even from the county executive at the top. There is real need in our midst. But I would like to raise up this data point about potential, that in 2019, the Urban Institute analysis of 800 vacant parcels in Arlington and Fairfax County in Virginia, Montgomery County and DC, and estimated that anywhere from 43,000 to 109,000 new housing units could be built on those 800 parcels, just from their kind of back of the envelope estimates. So yes, a lot of houses of worship are existing in a sea of need. I like to say, just like the story of the healing at the gate called Beautiful, where oftentimes we are going in and out of worship, but we've got people literally in need at the doors of our houses of worship. And so there is real potential to use and catalyze that land to meet the needs that exist. We can go to the next slide. So what do we offer? Historically, since 2006, we have continued to augment and build on what we offer. We have trainings on various aspects of the development process, designed to make clergy and lay leaders not experts, but to become comfortably conversant in various aspects of the development process, understanding how you go from a concept to pre-development to construction to long-term operations. We provide various types of catalytic capital, market study and feasibility grants, recoverable early pre-development grants. People have access to all of enterprise products, but we always encourage folks, shop around for your developer, for your financing, right? For always look around. So the key for us through the faith-based development initiative is really some early catalytic dollars to help people as they're making the informed go, no-go decision, and then help them get connected again to folks who can help them move along the way, which is on our next slide, if we can go to that. Various types of technical assistance, organizational development, zoning and market analysis, feasibility studies, project-specific TA, legal assistance, making sure folks get connected if they don't already have a lawyer, making sure they get connected there. And then development consultants, right? Having bullpens of developers and development consultants who can work with folks in targeted ways in the very early stages, essentially as owners, reps, and then helping people to understand the process by which you go to identify a development partner, be it a nonprofit or a mission-oriented for-profit. What are the types of questions that you want to ask the process, making sure you've got a lawyer and or a consultant on your side of the table and negotiate your interest there. We have just in the last couple of years really started to focus now on multi-year deep dive cohorts that provide really the full range of technical assistance and early pre-development financial support to the houses of worship, and we'll talk more about that. We can go to the next slide. So what have we accomplished historically through our faith partners have brought more than 1,500 units online and also a health clinic. There are over 1,200 units in the pipeline. You'll see the kind of financing that we provided, but that financing doesn't tell the whole story. There are a lot of various partners in the marketplace who provided financing. That's just what Enterprises provided, but there are various banks, CDFIs, and others. You heard Claude talk about it. There are a number of players who provide financing out there who are touching projects that we've been involved with. Hosted a range of training sessions, networking luncheons, iron sharpens iron sessions where clergy can share lessons one with another. We've graduated 22 houses of worship through a cohort program in Baltimore, and just recently have been supported by Wells Fargo, an example of our cohort now. So Wells Fargo put up $1 million for us to do a cohort in DC. The DC Department of Housing Community Development matched that with $750,000 plus to work with 17 houses of worship over a 3-year span. DC's Department of Housing just put out an RFP recently, an RFA for $1 million. So we were awarded that. So we're gonna work with 12 additional houses of worship over a 2-year span to go deep. So it's an example of public-private partnerships and going deep with cohorts of houses of worship. And we're using that model. We're in conversation now, even with the county staff, about how we may be able to replicate something like that in Montgomery County. We can go to the next slide. So the next several slides, I won't go into deep detail on because I want to focus on some of the lessons learned. This deck will be available to participants on this call, but these are just various examples of very different types of projects. This first one is an interesting one because it provides grandparent housing in addition to multifamily rental housing. So that's a unique element there on that project. Mission First was mentioned earlier on the St. Anne's project. They've done a number of faith-based projects in the region. We can go to the next slide. This is an interesting one because it's a different model. The East of the River Clergy Police Community Partnership, one of our initial co-conveners. This is a coalition of churches who are working together around public safety issues along with the police department in DC for a number of years, and pooled some resources, had the nonprofit secure a building that initially was targeting housing for formerly incarcerated men, now focusing on formerly homeless. So an interesting model there, and they are working on a phase 2 now. We can go to next slide. Interesting project here in one of the most gentrifying neighborhoods in the country, as identified by a national publication several years ago, with 50 units reserved for extremely low income households. We heard the county executive talk about the need for deep income targeting. And so this is an interesting project that provides some of that housing. We can go to the next slide. Interesting here in Northern Virginia on a parking lot owned by a house of worship. We can go to the next slide. Kind of what I call quote unquote straight ahead, right? Senior housing, again, built on parking lot owned by a church over in Southeast Washington. We go to the next slide. This is an interesting one where a church, Israel Baptist Church, transit-oriented development near the Rhode Island Avenue Metro, did two portions of a project. They did a senior housing, 47-unit affordable senior housing development on land they bought. This image that you see is land, a building that was built on their parking lot. First 2 floors, expanded healthcare clinic, Unity Healthcare is the anchor tenant, top floor, a banquet hall and meeting space, right? Affordable banquet meeting space for the community there. So great 2-part project. We can go to the next slide. Mixed use project, affordable rental, ground floor. You've got a pharmacy owned by a local operator and daycare. We can go to the next slide. So let me get into some questions that we wanted to share some insights based on lessons learned in the last 8 minutes or so that I have. That we've learned that we wanted to share with folks as you think about this, and examples of the kinds of things that we go into in some of our trainings and workshops. Do you have site control of the land? And what do you want to maintain ownership and site control over the long term? Questions for the house of worship to think about. If so, making sure that your lawyer, right, is aware of that. What are your short and long-term economic goals for the house of worship? Do you expect cash flow from the development to the house or to the house's affiliated, the house of worship's affiliated nonprofit? Are you willing to subsidize the project or to just break even? There's no right or wrong answer, but you want to be intentional about asking these questions and knowing what the answer is so that as you move forward in the project, your interest, the interest of the house of worship can be negotiated accordingly. Are you willing to contribute any portion of the land value to the transaction? That can help reduce the need for subsidy and or can help with deeper income targeting. Again, no right or wrong answer to this question, but the house of worship wants to be intentional. If the land's worth $1, do you want to receive $1 back, or 75 cents, or 50 cents, or 30 cents that you're willing to donate part of the value of the land to the project? So being intentional about asking that. What type of housing community facility will you develop? What is the target market? What is the targeted impact? And making sure that you know, and this is why the market study feasibility analysis is so critical, is there a real need for what it is you have a vision of doing? I always say one of our success stories was actually a no-go decision. An Episcopal church that we were working with actually years ago was contemplating doing some senior housing. And at the time, the market study said there was an oversupply of senior housing. Things can obviously change over time. But you want to make sure that there's a real need for what it is you're going to build. Next slide. Do you have an economic empowerment interest or racial equity goals? So when you build a project, right, if you're going to build affordable housing, the affordable housing just by itself is a benefit to community. Just if you don't do anything else, right, we're providing affordable housing for low-income people, great. There are a lot of folks who get paid on an affordable housing project, jobs that are generated, everything from the financiers, the banks or the CDFIs, to the landscaper, to the title company, to the developer, to the bank that holds the money. There are all kinds of folks. Do you want to create jobs on that? We had one church who actually said they created a property management company, and they worked out an agreement with their development partner to train the people at the project management company they created, so that they could learn that business over time and at some point take that over. I'm literally down here in Miami to do an announcement of a faith-based development work down here in Miami, and was on a call today with a pastor who was asking the questions about who are the minority vendors who are involved in the projects that are going on. That's a priority for them. So asking questions of if that's an interest for you, being intentional about thinking about how to engage and meet those goals. Do you, as the house of worship, expect to have an active role in the development? Do you have a separate entity for the development? Some houses of worship don't have a nonprofit at all. That's fine. Some do. In many cases, it's a paper nonprofit. What I mean by that, it's volunteer driven. There's no paid staff. There's no real functioning board. There are no audited financials, right? So it's really more of a paper organization driven by volunteers. Some have a real freestanding, separate nonprofit that is an operating entity with all of what I just described. And so whatever that situation is, if you want it to be a part of the development partnership, you need to be clear about that, understand what the strengths and weaknesses are. Are you needing to create legal firewalls between that entity and the joint venture partnership and the actual house of worship? And what are the implications, again, for long-term ownership or control of the land if that's a priority? Making sure, again, your lawyer knows that and that gets negotiated with your development partner. Is there a development team and main point of contact within the house of worship? Who makes a decision, right? Do you have a congregational polity or a connectional polity? Is there one committee or 12 committees that have to make the decisions, right? So being clear on that. And do you have a real estate attorney who represents just the interests of the house of worship? Oftentimes, if you're going to partner with a developer, they will have their lawyer who will represent then the partnership. That's great. One of the lessons learned is that many churches have said, look, we want to make sure we have a lawyer who represents just our interest as you go forward. We can go to the next slide. So some of the lessons learned also, unfamiliarity with the process can often lead houses of worship to take no action. And what we suggest is every house of worship, we're not saying should be building affordable housing on their land, but certainly be intentional about thinking about it and making an informed go or no go decision as opposed to taking no action because you're just not familiar with the process. That's why extensive technical assistance is needed. We talked about that. The connection to intellectual capital is so important, which we've outlined. It's important to understand the different timelines that folks in the faith community and the folks in the development community have. I always say that the frame of reference for folks in the development community is quarterly. The frame of reference for many of us in the faith community is eternity. And so what we oftentimes need to do is speed up, right, the faith community and slow down the developers and help us meet somewhere in the middle. We got to be clear that also at times mistrust and lack of appreciation by both sides of who's bringing what value to the table can be an issue. So be clear on what value the house of worship is bringing, the land, political connections you may have in the neighborhood and or with local government officials. What are the values that the developer brings? Maybe the ability to provide financial guarantees and the like. Each side bringing value, understanding that. Understanding what's in it for me, what's in it for the organization, for the house of worship, what are your goals, priorities that you want to get out of, and understanding for your development partner, what's in it for them and other vendors. Clergy leaders needing to be clear about casting vision, gaining buy-in from membership, as well as obviously community, but also understanding the need to delegate day-to-day management, oftentimes the authority, not the responsibility, but the authority for someone to make sure that there's decision-making. We can go to the next slide. So this is just, I'm not going to preach to a gathering of folks in the faith community, but I include this because there are times when folks will need, like, what is the grounding? You'll have people in your faith community who may say, why are we doing this? We're not in the development game, right? And so, of course, classic story, Nehemiah rebuilding the wall, but I always like to flag these things about being compelled and bothered by the need. Again, there's a lot of need that exists around us, and many of us aren't really aware of it. Many of us are commuters to our houses of worship. We drive in and drive out and don't really know about the need that exists right in the neighborhood where we worship. Prayer goes a long way. Move, not touch. Government support is okay. There is a biblical earmark reference in the story of Nehemiah, right? The allocation of timber for the rebuilding of the wall. Some people get hesitant about using government money. There's government resources allocated in the story of the rebuilding of the wall. Understand that earmark in biblical terms is okay. That money is our money. Surveying the need. When we talk about market studies, when Nehemiah went out, looked at the wall, right? That's a survey, right? That's a market study. What's the real need here? What are we looking at? Kind of a zoning analysis. Obviously, casting vision, getting people engaged. Public-private partnerships are key. Love the fact that when you read that story, that Nehemiah had priests involved in the rebuilding, had governors involved in the rebuilding, and had perfumers. So the way I read that, that's religious folks, government folks, and private sector business folks all involved in the rebuilding project. That's what it takes. Asim mentioned that these things are difficult. They are imminent. They are absolutely difficult and imminently doable. Both things are real. You know there'll be naysayers. Remember who you're working for. We can go to the next slide, final slide. A couple of resources here that are available for you. A paper that was done about leveraging property owned by faith-based organizations to create affordable homes, and a joint venture guidebook that our colleagues in New York worked on with the Supportive Housing Network of New York. We will look forward, as I close, to, again, continued conversations with the county about how we may be supportive in bringing that cohort framework to Montgomery County in a targeted way and working with houses of worship. That all being said, though, on this last slide, actually the final slide, contact information for myself, and also if we go to the next slide, and for my colleague, Reverend Joe Williams, you can reach out to us if you are interested in seeing ways in which we may be able to be helpful. So with that, I'll turn the mic back over to Kate. Thank you, and God bless each of you all with your efforts.
Thank you so much. I love what you said about, the immediate and the eternal. And so I want to, before we open up to questions, I want to stop there. But first, if you have questions, please raise your hand or put them in the chat so we can address them. But for a lot of you, you are probably listening to this presentation. You are probably thinking about your house of worship and thinking, we can't do this. We don't even have space for a parking lot, or there's some reason in mind. And so I want to give you all an ask today, and that ask is to push this message out to other houses of worship that do have this capability. I know the faith community is really passionate about affordable housing, but a lot of folks really aren't aware of this opportunity. And so if you can share this webinar, or better yet, if you can attend the in-person event that our Religious Land Use Working Group is putting together, that will have a lot of these speakers there as well, we would really appreciate it. So I do not see any questions yet, but we have at least 10 more minutes for questions from folks if you have any.
Hey, Kate, there was one question that was sent to me about were properties that were in the 2019 Urban Institute mainly within or close to the Beltway, or were the properties further out in the suburbs? And so the answer to that question is not certain exactly where all those 800 parcels were. My understanding is that they were all over, kind of inside and outside Beltway, kind of close in and further out. So I do think they were generally dispersed. I see a hand up from Reverend Courtney Miller too over there. Oh, I know I always got an eye on Reverend Miller.
Greetings, Dave. Greetings, and thank you, Kate, for putting this together, and all others who are involved. Dave, you are excellent. You've been at this work from both sides, the finance and development side, for a very, very long time. Glad to see you still in the game. I had a question from the county side of the house. If we have some property we're interested in doing for potential development, where do we begin the process to see if our land is actually developable? My word. Do we start with the county? Do we start with an enterprise? Where do we actually start the investigation?
From the county, I was going to say, from the county side, one of your first things is to understand your land, the zoning, what the capacity of the land is relative to what your ideas are. So there's information, that you can look up, or you can contact us at DHCA. We can help you just navigate some of the basics. But the fundamentals of whether or not it's developable from a financial perspective is going to need input from development professionals. And we can, we're talking about some of them today. We can help you identify those, but as can the folks in Enterprise, NHT, and others can help you connect with and start evaluating financial feasibility and a lot of the upfront components.
I mean, if you have any questions about your land per se, we can also put you in touch with the planning department folks. But in terms of whether or not it's feasible, that's where the feasibility consultant comes into play. So that's another person's responsibility to look into and guide you the process. So some of the things that you heard from David's presentation was you have to start thinking about put it together a team. But before you go too far out there, if you're just at the initial stage, this is simply an idea whether or not this will work or not. So you may want to talk to, whether it's us or it's entities like Enterprise or someone, so to guide you to see whether or not your land could be developed. But then ultimately someone will have to give you some professional opinion. We cannot give you professional opinion, and I'm sure Enterprise cannot give you professional opinion either. Someone, has to give you a professional opinion whether or not anything can be done on this piece of land.
So you should, just to clarify, we're in the process of just checking to see what the zoning is in the area. So we would start with the county first.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this information is available, but if you cannot find it, you can approach us and we can put you in touch with someone, with the planning folks who can tell you what you can or cannot do depending on the zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I would just add, Kate, if I may, one of the kind of 1-2 punch, it's always great, and that's free, right? If you can get that kind of feedback from the county for free, if you would, from the Office of Planning about what's allowable or not, that's a critical first step. We always talk in terms of market study, like is there a demand for it, feasibility analysis, and the feasibility is around include zoning, but it also says whatever it is that can be built, how easy or not, and I say easy in quotes, to get financed. So for example, if you're looking at building senior housing, that's the vision of the church, and someone may say, hey, this land is zoned senior housing and you can do it by right, you can do that by right, great. But getting it financed, right, knowing whether or not the financing that you may need from the state or the county. Is that a high priority or a low priority in the latest rounds? If the zoning won't allow it by right, is it really hard to get a variance or pretty easy? Do they happen pretty often or not? So when folks are talking to government officials and/or the development professional, you want to ask questions, that includes what's allowable kind of technically, but also how practical, how often do these things happen as part of the feasibility conversation.
Thank you so much, David. So before handing it off to Reverend Moultrie, I'm going to address one of the questions in the chat from Michelle. When is the in-person event to be scheduled? We are still working on it because the goal is that we want people to visit and see affordable housing on a house of worship property. So they're still trying to figure out those details, but I will keep you informed. And the slides and the recording of this program, I'm going to share at least within 2 days of you being here. So very shortly after. All right, Reverend Moultrie, off to you.
Kate, thank you so much for this town hall. This is astounding information. I really appreciate it. I'm excited by everything that I've heard, but I think I have a problem that that gets in the way of this. So here's my simple question. The property that we own is within the city of Rockville limits. How much does that change the game?
There's nothing, nothing substantially different about development. County resources are used in all jurisdictions. Landlord-tenant laws are different. Some of the administrative responsibilities differ, but the county invests and supports housing development in all areas of the county.
That is awesome. Thank you so much.
But at the same time, you may want to check in with City of Rockville folks just to make sure that they don't have any priorities as such, so that you don't, trip over your own priorities.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Moultrie. All right, I think we have time for 1 or 2 final questions if anybody has any.
Kate, I saw Rosetta Robinson looked like she had her hand up.
She's at least cheering us on.
Bless you, my brother, Reverend David. So good to see you again. It's been a long, long time when we were both starting out in ministry. Too long. We'll have to get together again. I'm really interested in not so much logistics and just a kind of a faith kind of question and community engagement and relationships. I wonder if there's some examples of churches, house of worship, building affordable housing, and there's a relationship with those who are going to inhabit that housing. And so the church is not just a landlord or the developer, but I'm wondering if are there some projects where there's been some unique engagement with the community and there's that kind of partnership?
Yeah, I'll jump. Oh, go ahead, Asim. I see you're about to go in.
No, you can go ahead. I can give you an example from a prior life. It was a project in DC. As you know, you have to seek ANC commissioner support. So this project was developed by a church. They had formed a nonprofit for the separation between the church and the state. But still, they had to go to the community meetings, have the buy-in from the community, the ANC commissioner for that area, to make sure that the community is agreeable with whatever was going to be put on that property. So it was a small site, but it created a couple of hundreds of units with underground parking garage and a wellness center, everything that you could think of, including a daycare center as well. So yes, so you have to see where your project is and how you're going to engage the community. And that also depends upon, if you're going to go for a zoning variance or something, how to engage the community. And it's always good, whether or not you need the zoning variance, it's always good to engage the community just to have the community buy-in for your project to be successful. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, thanks, Asim. But just echoing on that, we have unfortunately seen too many examples on and kind of the reverse where the kind of classic NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard kind of deals, but that ultimately ended up successful in some ways. Like First Baptist Church of Clarendon, I believe, had to go all the way to the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, if I'm remembering that correctly, in their battle, but they had good support from majority of like kind of community and the county, but had some opposition from county folks. Arlington Presbyterian Church worked with a group called APA, a nonprofit, and very interesting, they were looking at actually shutting down the church, and through their prayer and discernment, their initial kind of thinking, they kind of bumped their heads and then kind of stopped, paused, did some prayer, did some real intentional community engagement in a different kind of way. And it led to them ending up developing a project and actually renting out space there and staying active as a worshiping community, which is a real interesting example. As Asim said, you've got churches in DC working with ANCs, and you hear all kinds of stories about, how you have to do that. Folks who invoke historic preservation to try to defeat projects and how you have to engage with that. So it is that notion of gaining buy-in from your own membership within the house of worship, but also gaining buy-in from the local community, because reality is in some places, houses of worship are seen as great neighbors, and in some cases they're seen as not good neighbors and not welcome neighbors, even though the institution may have been there for decades and decades or a century. So don't take it for granted for that you're going to get neighborhood support. Be intentional about gaining that buy-in.
Yeah, and I appreciate your saying, because you would want to be good neighbors. And you would also want, if possible, that's what I was thinking about, whether or not there could be a continuing relationship with those who are going to be utilizing their housing.
Yeah.
And you're just not distant from what has happened on your own land.
And we've seen some of that too with folks, particularly who are trying to serve, say, folks who are coming out of homelessness or extremely low income. And we've a couple of examples of houses of worship who've been intentional in that way and engaging with that community, seeing that need, providing services and housing, and trying to be intentional in that way with the community.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Janice, I see that your hand is up. Do you have a question for us?
Okay. My question, Asim, I wanted to ask him, today I was in another program and I heard about Maryland Mortgage Program has announced 2 new products. I don't know if you went over that tonight or not. It had to do with additional down payment and closing cost assistance. And they say the options now available first-time home buyers. Are you familiar with that? It was just announced today.
Asim, you're on mute.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. This was announced today. We have not caught up with that program yet, but I would say those programs are run by the state. So my suggestion would be, as the state announced the previous homeowners assistance program, I think in December of last year, to contact the state, with any questions per se.
Well, it was in an affordable housing program for the National Housing Conference, and they had some of the people from FHA, and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. There were a lot of leaders there. And this came through and it said that it's a new program. So I will look more into it, but it might be a program that these people might want to know about, especially if we're talking about affordable housing. They're talking about first-time home buyers. It's an additional, we're talking about trying to bring into the community more down payment and closing cost assistance funding. So that's why I brought it up. I didn't know.
Certainly, that's useful information. Maybe you can share the information with Kate, and she can, when we are sending out our slides, we can include that information as well. So that will be helpful.
Yeah, they just issued a press release without a lot of details, but it does expand the dollar amount, percentage of loan amount eligible for their down payment closing cost assistance. So it's, it'll be very helpful. It expands a very strong program. And so it's, thank you for noting that. I had not seen the press release, but are looking at it now. So it's a relatively modest but important increase in their down payment assistance.
Oh, so that's good. Maybe you can share that with Kate, or
Yep.
we'll make sure, but we really need to know about this so that what's keeping people in many cases from buying is the down payment and closing costs. So if they have additional programs in place that will help them, that's good.
Thank you, Ms. Janice. All right, I really appreciate all of you being here, especially during so many different religious holidays that are taking place right now. Just some closing thoughts. I'm going to be sending out the slides and the information. Please stay tuned for the Religious Land Use Working Group's in-person event. I'm really looking forward to that. Our next town hall is going to be May 3rd with the Jewish Council of the Aging to learn more about their resources. Folks typically hear Jewish and they think that the resources are just for the Jewish community, but they have a number of really wonderful resources that are available to the faith community and beyond in Montgomery County. And that's going to be May 3rd, which is also a Tuesday at 7 p.m. And I'm going to ask if any of our participants today have any final thoughts or anything that they would like to share before we close out.
I would just say, thank you very much, Kate, for organizing this, and thanks to all of our partners for making their presentation, and thanks to all of you. We deeply appreciate your guidance and your support and your cooperation in working with us, because without your assistance, we won't be successful in getting the word out. So thank you for being the trusted voices in your community, and thank you for working with us. And we are here to help you if you have any questions. I know after this information overload, you must be wondering, what did we talk about? So as you absorb this information over the coming days or weeks and you have additional questions for us, please reach out to us. We are here to assist you in any way possible.
And Kate, did you say you're going to make this available to us later?
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to include a link and some slide decks for you.
Thank you.
Of course.
I just say thanks to the county officials again for hosting this event. And thanks to all of you all for showing up tonight. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all so much for being here. This was a popular topic. Please also feel free to send me topic ideas that you have, things that you want to hear more about, and resources that you want to know are more available to you. But we really appreciate you all for being here. And we're really grateful to all of our panelists for coming and sharing their knowledge and expertise with us. All right, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Next time.
Thank you, everyone. Good
Bye.
night.